This is week 2, Viva 2, and this week's Viva was on Paul. So although most people when they think of Paul, they just think of his missionary work, he actually did a lot more than that. He shaped the church's theology, shifted the church from a Jewish to a Greco-Roman institution, and shaped the way the church was structured. So first was how he shaped the church's theology. Yes. And so, like I said, people usually think of Paul's mission as going out and spreading the gospel to the Gentiles. And they usually underestimate his theological work. And I quote, "His emphasis on God's grace, his focus on the work of the cross, and his understanding of the law impacted the development of the church." And so he didn't just focus on missionary work, he also focused on what the Bible meant and what Jesus had actually said on his time here at earth. And so after Paul is converted, he goes to the apostles and is like, "Hey, you're teaching this all wrong," which was a surprise to them, because they were like, "We've walked with Jesus and you have been hurting us Christians for years." And so they didn't quite trust him and didn't really like the fact that he came against Jesus' family and his disciples. And this didn't just subside after a few years of them realizing, oh, Paul's actually a good guy. This continued throughout Paul's life. But he did claim, however, that the status and authority of apostle due to a series of visions and revelations which he experienced beginning at his conversion on the road to Damascus, And so he said that Jesus had told him that he had the authority of an apostle, which all the not the real apostles, that sounds wrong. The disciples of Jesus all doubted that highly. And so, like I said, Paul had come against the apostles on a number of occasions and said that they were doing it all wrong, and that what they weren't actually thinking through what Jesus had actually told them. And so the apostles, after Jesus had went back, kept the old Jewish conditions and kept the connection between Christianity and Judaism, but it was heavily on the Judaism side. And the church was led by James, Jesus' brother. And so Paul did not feel like this was right, and so he stood up against them. And he had no problem with this. And one example of this is when he stood up against Peter, one of Jesus' disciples. And so the story starts with Peter eating with the Gentiles. And James then sends some men to go check on him, and when the Jewish men arrive, Peter backs away because he's afraid of what the Jewish people will think of him eating with Gentiles. And so Peter was being a hypocrite, and Paul saw this and came to him and confronting him at Antioch and pointed out his hypocrisy, which also made Peter mad. So second, Paul also shaped the Jewish institution and changed it into a Greco-Roman institution. And so to understand this, you have to look back at Paul's history. Paul was a Jewish person who was a Roman citizen. He was Greek-speaking, and he was taught by one of the most revered Jewish teachers of the time. And he was a tent maker, or a awning maker for Roman houses. And so this is he pretty much went to a Harvard school for Jewish people. Oh, and he was a Pharisee, sorry. And so he had a lot of connections everywhere, and so was able to communicate with people very well. But because of his background in like a Harvard institution or being taught by the best, he quoted many Greek and Roman writers, and also used Greco-Roman rhetorical arguments. And so he's taken quotes from Medar, Epimenides, and Seneca and Aristotle, and he used a lot of their quotes in the Bible as verses. And so then he also drew metaphors drawn from Greco-Roman culture's norms and laws, unquote. And so he used this to shape the Jewish people's culture into the Jewish institution to what he has learned, and drew from the Greco-Roman institution and added it into Judaism. So third, Paul shaped the church's structure. As he evangelized, he used the Roman structure to his advantage. And this Roman structure is the patron and client method. And so there's someone who's higher up who has a bunch of people come to their house who are clients, and he